Welcome back to another Terranscapes video. Hopefully you weren't worried between the I'm back video and this video. There was a little bit of a gap there, but it is because grammar, that I have been doing quite a bit of changes in terms of equipment and general shooting environment. I've did some shooting with the new setup. So I've changed the camera's angles, lighting at the bench, better angles to show work in progress. Now I got sound blankets up, so I'm hoping that this is going to make a really big difference in reverb. And so I wanted to get all of that done before I start shooting the actual work on the project, because I want to show you more about what I'm doing as I go along. I want to bring you more inside the actual project. That's my goal. And I want to thank my patrons. I need to. I think about you guys all the time because all of this stuff, you know, I've got new cables coming, getting all the sound blankets and power adapters for the LEDs, so I don't have to have batteries, right? I've been doing a lot of changes to try to make things a little bit easier and a little bit better looking when I'm working, and all of that is being funded by my patrons. So I just want you to know that when you support me, that is support that is going right back into trying to make these videos better for you, for everyone. But my patrons are the ones who are pulling the heavy weight on that, and I just want to thank them so much. And I'm going to be adding a third camera. I've tried a third camera before. New camera, new setup, more learning. And before we get to the cocktail, I just want to say I've got a couple notable mentions at the end of this video, so I hope you'll stick around for them. And it seems like now it's time for a cocktail.
This cocktail is kind of like a martini. The main ingredient is gin, and it's got a little apricot brandy, so martini fans will probably like this. It's called a Douglas Fairbanks. Who Douglas Fairbanks is, I don't know. I don't even know if it's the name of the guy that invented the drink, but this is it. Let's get our martini glass. Let's have it chilling off to the side with ice, and actually I could probably add a little water in there, will help get good coverage on the cold. Let's take our shaker glass, and we're going to fill it with ice. And now the main ingredient is the gin. We're going to use 2 ounces. Let's break out our jigger here to help us with this pour. It's a 1 ounce jigger, so we're going to do this twice. Like so. And our apricot brandy, apricot, ½ ounce of that. And we're going to finish off with a splash, just a splash of sour mix. Shake it up. Get nice and cold. Very refreshing looking, this Douglas Fairbanks. I think you might have been onto something. Check this out. There we go. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to try some of that. That looks delicious. Down the hatch.
Douglas Fairbanks. So he was born in 1883, made his first movie in 1915. He met Mary Pickford 1916 at a party, and they immediately started having an affair. Douglas ended up divorcing his wife in 1918, and then essentially demanded that, put an ultimatum to Miss Pickford that she needs to divorce her husband as well. Now, she ended up getting divorced in 1920, so they'd been together for a little bit, and 3 weeks after that, they get married. The thing that's noteworthy about that event, though, aside from bringing these two soon-to-be and growing titans of the movie industry, is that that's pretty scandalous. You know, they're having an affair, they're both married. You know, he's like, drop your husband, come with me, right? Normally, that would be quite an uncomfortable public disclosure. Yet, because both of these actor, were so beloved, the fans were like, oh my God, thank God they're together. It's so awesome. They're so cute. They're so, you know. So this was like the first couple to be the superstar couple, you know? This is the Brad and Angelina kind of event, and it's the first event of that kind. So very noteworthy. Now, in 1917, they joined with Charlie Chaplin to sell war bonds. And if you remember Mary Pickford, that was a very big push that she made. So this was the time all three of those came together. And it was the same year that he was really starting to become a leading man. He was getting a lot of recognition. He was a very good-looking guy, very athletic, very charming, playing the ladies' man. So he's starting to rise. And by 1918, he is the third highest paid actor in Hollywood. And so you can see him starting to cultivate his career and to make himself a superstar. And if you remember from the Mary Pickford short, that in 1919, they team up with Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Fairbanks. I'm going to say they because they're an item. And D.W. Griffith, and they formed United Artists. I don't know too much about Mr. Griffith, but United Artists, they formed initially to try to break block booking. So they wanted to create an independent movie studio that would not force block booking onto theater owners. What is block booking? I did not know. I had to look it up. 1 second. Block booking was the practice of selling movies, only selling movies, to a theater in a group. Sometimes that group would be a dozen, sometimes it would be 40, sometimes it would be more. So if you wanted the superstar movies in your theater, you had to buy these other movies along with it. So anyway, they formed United Artists to try to break that. And actually, not shortly thereafter, now by 1920, he had already shot 29 movies, and at this point was starting to be able to kind of call his own shots, especially because he was making some of his own movies. And so he decided to take a chance and go into a costumed swashbuckling role. And he starred in The Mark of Zorro. And this movie blew up. This really pumped him up to superstar status, and he made several more movies in that genre. He made The Three Musketeers, he made Robin Hood, and he made a couple others, and all of those were extremely popular movies. He was like the man at that point in movie industry, and because he was funding his own movies, he made them lavish, and some of the sets and the scope of the people and the action, really, really impressive. There's even a shot in Black Pirate, that's another one of his popular ones, and they have a model boat, and they blow it up. A pirate boat that's detonated from powder kegs inside. And I was like, oh, look at that model. Oh, that's a cute little model. Very interesting to see special effects at that time period. Now, all of these were silent films, and the last silent film he made, which is weird, hybrid, is The Iron Mask. Now, this is a sequel to The Three Musketeers, and I have not seen it, but I did go and look at clips of some of these movies. And what's noteworthy about it is that he gives the prologue speaking as a sort of, as a prologue. And then the movie, instead of having dialogue cards come up, there's voiceover from, I don't know, voice actors that are, it's not dubbed, it's dialogue cards, but read for you over the movie. Really interesting. I didn't even know that had been done. It may have only been done for this movie. Very unique, sort of hybrid time period for silent going into talkies. Now, in 1925, he decided he'd make his first official talkie film and make it with his wife, Mary Pickford. This was going to be her first as well. And they made The Taming of the Shrew together. And this movie bombed. It really bombed. And in fact, all of his subsequent films in the talking era did really poorly. Essentially, his career imploded at that point, and he ended up leaving movies in 1936, the same year that he divorced Mary Pickford, because he was having another affair. You know, it's hard to be the best looking man in Hollywood and I guess stay with the same woman. Times don't change, right? Times don't change. They just didn't have Us Weekly and the National Enquirer back then. I'm sure they had some other tabloids though. And one thing I noticed when I was watching various clips of him and looking at all the stills of him is that he always has this joie de vivre. You know, he's always smiling in his sword fights. He's confident. He's kind of laughing, almost mocking his opponent, but in this playful way. You know, it's like, here's this life and death situation, but for him, it's just play. And that is so, it's a characteristic of him that helped make him charming. And I think it's really endearing. You know, it was like fun to watch him act because of this larger than life persona. And that, coupled with his rather attractive physique, he was a extraordinarily dedicated athletic devotee, which is maybe redundant, but he had like a separate track installed under his house to run in between movie shoots and stuff. I don't want to get into it. The guy liked to work out, liked to tan, and it showed, and people loved it. And you can actually get another sense of that sense of loving life because he wrote a self-help book, and he wrote it in 1917. It's called Laugh and Live. And it's about positive thinking and self-confidence and how that is going to bring you joy in your life. And let's see here, I'll have to read it. This was wait a minute. Excuse me, I'll have to read it because I won't remember it. This was one of the quotes describing it as a summary. Laugh and you'll be happy, fit, successful, a joy for your family and friends. Laugh and you'll be rich. Laugh and you'll learn, quite simply, how to live. It's a self-help book. You know, there were several at the time period. They've never gone out of style. But nevertheless, you can get a sense of kind of his character in that kind of topic for a self-help book. And in 1939, he died of a heart attack at the age of 56. He had been an avid smoker his whole life, so a little bit young to get snuffed out. And he had still been, very involved in movies, but not from an acting perspective, doing producing work and things like that. So a man who loved life, loved what he was doing, but ended up struggling to make a transition from one technology to the other and ending what was one of the most impressive acting careers of that time and probably stands tall against any of the acting careers up until this day. And while I have a sip, I'm going to put up an epitaph that described his adoration when he died, and I think it says a lot about his importance at the time period. Now it's time for viewer comments. Before I get into any specifics, I just want to thank all of the commenters who, I was really touched and very appreciative of all the comments that were being supportive of me taking the summer off, very encouraging, hoping that I would come back, and a lot of kind words were said. And I just thank you so much for that. Really, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful to read those. And so thank you for that. Let's keep some notes next to me. All right, so Till Brainman, he writes that he thought having a large viewing platform on top of the carriage, sort of a la, a big platform on top of an elephant, right, for safari or something like that, would save me a lot of time in converting minis, because then I could have a lot of the passengers standing up. And I actually had planned to have, some of maybe half of the passengers standing up, leaning on the rails. Perhaps I might go that direction a little more directly. I feel like maybe there should still be some seats, but maybe have more of the top be a standing platform, because it will help reduce the amount of conversion work done on the miniatures, which he mentions, and I think is not a bad idea. Not that I am afraid of it, but just that it's going to be consuming for quite a while. And man, I was looking at some other miniatures. I don't want to get into it, but it made me think about the underwater scene. And I was like, I don't want to spend all year on one project. So I'm going to try. I might shrink it down a little. Might take this, probably will take this up in some form, simplify the passengers on the top of the carriage somewhat. I think it can still look quite dynamic, and see what I can do with that. So thank you, Tim, for that suggestion. Grayson Desay mentions something about drinking. This is a common topic that keeps coming up. And this will be the last time I address it. It actually gave me a thought about how I'd address it a little differently, because his comment was a little different. He was mentioning, I hope I don't out you too much, Grayson, but it was public comment, that, he's seen people around him struggle with drinking and fall under its more destructive overtures. I have too also had family members and friends who have fallen under the dark spell of alcohol. So I'm really aware of what can happen. I think that drinking responsibly, I'm not buzzed yet. Drinking responsibly, or even semi-responsibly, is a wonderful thing. And some people can't do it. I've given up a lot of vices from when I was younger that I just can't do anymore. And so I totally understand where people might have, aversions or concerns. However, I promised myself that I would never give up drinking, because it's the last vice I have. And God damn it, I think you got to have a vice. You got to have something. It's a bit emotional, but I am a strong proponent of having a vice. You don't have to try to live forever. You have to try to enjoy the life that's good. That's the good part of it. And I think having a well-blended cocktail named after a very, very interesting movie star is a wonderful activity to have at night. But be responsible. Be responsible. Thank you, Grayson, for asking that question, because it gave me a chance to address it in a little bit of a different way than I have in the past. And just for all of you out there, you don't have to comment about drinking or mention your experiences or anything like that. I mean, if you want to, that's fine. But sometimes it starts to build up its own momentum when it's not really that important, in my mind. So just throwing that out there. Synth, I think is how it's pronounced. Wait a minute. Synth, the onliest one. That's my best guess at pronouncing that. She mentioned that she uses Liquitex ceramic stucco for her texture paste. Now, she was viewing the video I did a ways back, comparing the Liquitex paste with Vallejo texture paste. I don't think I knew about their ceramic stucco at that time. Perhaps it hadn't even been released. And it does seem to have, just from looking at it from afar, does seem to have finer texture than some of those others. And I think that's probably a little bit better for being in scale with the miniatures, as really dirt is so often overscaled. It really jumps out as out of scale. Not everybody is walking around on pea gravel. You know what I mean? If that's something you're interested in, if you're looking for a texture paste to model soil, that might be something to take a look at. Stargate 4040 mentions that he had some constructive criticism, which I love. I love it when you people chime at you people. That sounds sort of demeaning. When you wonderful viewers chime in on with the work I'm doing and give me some good feedback on it, I love that. And so I think he was like, he felt a little nervous maybe about giving me some criticism. Never worry. So he mentioned on the Orc Board that he felt that the vegetation was disproportionately distributed. I had some very, very dense clumps, and then I had some very, very open flat space with no vegetation. And then he was mentioning I suppose it's a he, might be a she. They were mentioning that the top of the cliff was artificially flat looking. And the reason is really about compromising with the ability to put miniatures on those areas and the flexibility to move plants around to accommodate changing unit sizes or different army compositions. So it is one of the struggles whenever you're working with terrain for gaming, in that you have to find some compromise between realism and functionality. And so that is why those effects show up. It's just something you have to work with. But he did mention that he thought the cliff face was a little flat. Now, that has nothing to do with functionality, and I thought that that's a pretty interesting observation. I tried to put a little lean in it. Like, I'll try to create an undercut sometimes on a cliff to give it a little bit more of a dynamic, slope or look. But it would be nice to have more, irregular contours on it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back. If you're brand new, I didn't even welcome you. Welcome. If you're brand new, thank you so much for joining me and coming to the channel and seeing this video. This is not the normal video. This is a Cocktails and Comps video, but I still want to thank you for joining me. It made me think that to create some real crevasses, maybe in the face or like jagged pieces hanging off or something like that, that it would take quite a bit of work to modify the cast, because I cast all those pieces in resin. And so cutting those up and reshaping them and then filling in those gaps. But it could be done. And I think I probably could have done some of that work, although I had plenty of work done on the project and I needed to get done with it. But it's a nice thought for the future in recognizing, same for you, when you cast a sheet of rock from a Bragdon's mold or another similar, maybe you make your own mold from latex rubber, right? And you cast this sheet, don't view it as a sheet, view it as maybe strips of rock, right, that you could tear and paste up onto something. There's some complications with that, depending on how you cast it and how you back it. And I don't want to get into that if it's plaster or whatever. But just to say, don't view it as, this is my sheet, that's what I have to work with, right? It can always be modified. You can add things on top of it, whatever. So I really like that comment because it gave me some thinking about an area where I could focus on some improvements next time I do something similar. Notable mentions. Real Terrain Hobbies. I think you should go check his channel out. I'll put a link in the description to the channel. And he did this wonderful, hold on. Peppery. He did this wonderful river board and shows all the steps that he went through it. It's a nice editing job. I think you can follow all of it really fairly clearly. I think quite clearly. And then his most recent video, he put up this ocean board he's working on that has this island. It's going to have a wizard's tower. It's a little bit of a work in progress still. But what he was doing with that wave, he's got this giant wave smashing on the rock. And I was like, that's cool. There's some things going on in that wave. I'm like, I want to know how you did that. So I'm going to be coming back and checking out his videos. But it's worth your visit. So Real Terrain Hobbies, check him out. And I also want to point you towards the Crafting Muse. And she does videos mostly for role-playing games, but terrain is terrain. And she does a lot of nice, simple projects that are, very approachable, but also look really nice when they're done, very functional, right? And she also does painting, which I thought was interesting. So she does miniature painting videos and does live streams. And so I liked her editing a lot. When I watched her barn construction video, I thought she did a really nice job of cutting that down to what needs to be shown, doing a voiceover of it to explain it. I was like, I could learn a little bit from that. I tend to be a little wordy. So anyway, that is the Crafting Muse, and I'll put a link to her channel in the description as well. So check her out. So that wraps things up. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'm going to get the third camera on the table running. I got to get a monitor in for that, but I'm going to probably start work before that happens. And I'm going to get back to the tour of Innsmouth, and we're going to get some work done on that, and I'm going to bring you along for the ride. You won't actually be on the Fairbanks. If you don't know what that is, then you haven't been following that playlist. But you can virtually sit on top of it. How's that? We'll all sit on top of it, look around, because I don't know what I'm going to show you. I don't know what I'm going to show me. It's an evolving process. It's just going to happen. So it's been a while since I've talked to you guys. I don't know. I just feel like chatting. So if you want to support this channel, you can do it on Patreon. If you want to like this video, you can do that. It feels stupid asking for likes. I don't know. Everybody does it. Doesn't mean I have to. Think about it. It's up to you. And definitely come back, because you know that I will be back soon with another Terranscapes video.